The views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the hosts and guests, and not necessarily those of the staff and management of WWDB-TV.
Get yourselves together. Right. Stand up and live your life. Right. Get yourselves together. Right. Hands up high.
I am Joe Peroni.
I'm Heidi Mancini, and our special guest, Michael Gowdy, is here with us today.
A little ovation.
Thank you, thank you.
And you are a criminal defense attorney.
I am.
And also, what really interests me is that you were a DJ on KDON.
Actually, I wasn't a DJ, but I did have a politics-oriented show on KDON. I was the only liberal on what is the most conservative station in all of Nevada, yeah.
All right, we're going to talk about that.
You're a brave one.
It was a good time.
But first, let's talk about being a criminal defense attorney.
Okay.
So tell me about your business.
Well, I've been practicing 26 years. I came up here from San Diego in 1999, right at the start of the boom as far as Las Vegas went. When I first got here, what attracted me to Las Vegas, I had a friend from law school who was already practicing up here. And he said, you need to move up here, it's wide open. There was no law school in Nevada at the time. So my bar number in the history of the Nevada bar is 6994. 7,000 lawyers in the history of Nevada bar. My bar number in California, when I passed the bar in 1992, was 161857, 161,000 lawyers before me.
Wow.
So it was a no-brainer to move up here, and it was the best move that I ever made.
Excellent. So what's the number one quality you need to be a great criminal defense attorney?
Balls. To be a great defense attorney, you've got to have balls of steel. Look, a good memory is great. Not being intimidated is great. Being able to speak in front of people without getting too nervous is an essential quality. But really what it comes down to is you've got to have the resolve for your client.
Right. Interesting.
Which means sometimes pushing right up against ethical boundaries.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Being a defense attorney, you get criminals that are guilty that, okay, I know they're not guilty until they're proven guilty, but as an attorney, do you know that they're guilty, but you still have to defend them?
I get that question all the time. That's probably the most asked question is how can you defend somebody you know to be guilty? First of all, most of my clients have done something. Whether they've done what the state is accusing them of doing is something else entirely. Number two, our system of justice is based on a presumption of innocence. I don't want to get too technical with this, but we're presumed to be innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. It's the government's, the prosecutor's job to do that. If they can infringe on the rights of the guilty, they can infringe on the rights of the innocent. I am upholding the system. That's the way you have to look at it when you're defending somebody you know has done something heinous. You still have to do your best because you're defending the system.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah. So basic due process, is that what you call it?
Due process, absolutely. Everybody's entitled under the Constitution to due process of law. That's right.
So what made you decide to become an attorney?
It's a good question. In high school, I thought I was going to play in the NFL. I was an all-city player in Los Angeles. Had a lot of success, and then I suffered a serious injury when I was a senior in high school. Had a number of scholarship offers which went away. When I finally did go to college, in high school I had a teacher in a class called Justice in America that wrote in my yearbook, "Don't scoff at the idea of Michael Gowdy, attorney at law," and it was something that had really never occurred to me. And as I went through college and I chose to pursue economics, God only knows why, because there's only a couple of things you can do with an economics degree. You can go to work for the government, you can go to work for Wall Street, basically. But it is a good degree to go to law school with. And when I was a senior, I found myself wondering what I was going to do with my life. So I took the LSATs and I busted them and decided to go to law school.
So what does it feel like when you're defending somebody and you know their life is kind of on the line? I mean, this is going to be a big change no matter what. What type of responsibility do you feel? How nervous do you get knowing that it's on your shoulders?
You feel an overwhelming responsibility. I mean, you really do, because like you say, we're not talking about money most of the time. We're talking about the difference between somebody remaining free or possibly going to prison. And that affects not only them, but their wife or husband or children, family members, their ability to keep their house, keep their job. There are so many things that ride on what I do. And yeah, it's tremendous responsibility. As for feeling nervous, not so much anymore. There are times when I get butterflies, and butterflies probably help me perform a little bit better, but nerves to the point where I might be paralyzed or something like that, that doesn't occur anymore. After 26 years of doing my job, I got pretty good at it.
So what happens when you lose? How do you?
Well, losing, there are varying degrees of losing. When I lose a trial, I feel bad. Obviously, it can be crushing to lose a criminal trial, but most cases are resolved through negotiations. And typically, here in Nevada, the prosecutors tend to overcharge most cases as a negotiating ploy. So you do one thing and they charge you with 5 other things, knowing that eventually perhaps it'll roll back to the one thing that you might actually be guilty of. It's my job to do better than that. So it's not only cut through the chaff, but really get to the wheat, get to the substance of it, and then do a little bit better for my clients.
So win or lose, at the end of the day, how difficult is it for you to just take off the tie and go home and be a father and to be a husband? Can you balance it?
That's a great question. It's taken me years, and I still don't have the ability to fully disengage a lot of times. The more pressure, more high pressure, more high profile cases that I get, the more I tend to take those home with me and kind of live with them. I've learned as my kids have gotten older, and I've been involved in so many other things. I coach youth sports, for example, and I coach in the Arborview High School feeder program for football, and I coach Little League Baseball, and those help me separate from my daily grind. If it weren't for those things, I'd probably go home and just stew most of the time.
But you have responsibilities at home, too.
I do, yeah, and I enjoy that.
Yeah. Tell me about your family.
I got 2 sons, 15 and 12. My older boy plays football at Arborview, and he's a good student. My younger boy enjoys baseball, and he's a great student. The difference between the two of them is the older one doesn't like to read that much, and the younger one's a voracious reader. So, but they're both good athletes, and they're both really good kids. My wife, Sopai, is originally from Thailand. She's a very sweet woman and a terrific mother and a great wife. Hi, honey.
How did you meet?
She was an executive chef at a Thai restaurant here in Las Vegas when I first moved up here. And I had traveled to Thailand just a few months before, and I was very much into the culture. And so I was finding different Thai restaurants, and I found this one, and I asked to meet the chef, and that was her, and one thing led to another, and pretty soon we were going out on a few dates. So it worked out well.
So on your Facebook, I think you went there fairly recently? Or
Yes. We
for
actually
like a long time, right?
We built a vacation house in northern Thailand, a beautiful area, beautiful house, and we spent 4 weeks over Christmas up there, and we were there we had a big party for about 650 people, all the people in the town where my wife grew up. We threw a party that lasted basically a full day.
So I was looking at that. How can you have a party with that many people? I mean, we lived in the same cul-de-sac for 10 years? I don't think I know anybody's name. I don't know our next door neighbor's name. How do you have 650 friends?
You know something? It's kind of strange because in Thailand, in northern Thailand, it's town after town after town, and they're all stringed together. And my wife grew up with these people from the time they were from the time she was born, and it's a completely different culture. Everybody is very much intertwined. It's not such a money-based culture because there's a lot of farming, so people have to depend on their friends to help them with their fields and to trade. There's a barter economy where they'll trade a lot of different type of foodstuffs and things like that. So it really fosters a sense of community that we don't have here anymore.
So when you come back here, how is it for you? I would imagine when you go there, you're like, okay, it turns your whole thought process of what human beings can be. Right here, we seem to be very individualistic. it's all about me or whatever, that type of thing, and
The pursuit
Gotta
of
be
whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish
at the expense of
at
other
the
people a
expense
lot
of
of
everybody
times.
else. Absolutely, and it's the word rat race
Exactly.
is a perfect description, because we're all running on a wheel after whatever the heck it is that we want to accomplish, and life is much slower back there. You know, I spend a lot of time in Bangkok also, and Bangkok is a very big city, and there's a lot of hustle and bustle, and it's very westernized from the standpoint of money and things like that. But when you get outside of the big cities and into the smaller towns, life really slows down, and it is terrific for me to go and completely disengage. And when I come back, it's always a shock that I have 50 text messages a day and 150 emails a day that I have to respond to.
Right.
When I was in Thailand, I turned my phone off and forget about all that stuff.
So when you have a culture like that, tell me what it means to you with like empathy and compassion for other human beings, because I think we kind of lack that in our culture here.
Absolutely. One of the amazing things back there is when someone passes away, how the entire community responds to it, and it's nothing like what occurs here. We might have a viewing or a showing or before a funeral or a wake, perhaps, and people will show up for 5 minutes. But back in the but throughout all Asian cultures, there's a period where the entire community pitches in and makes sure that the family is okay. And I'm Jewish, so it's akin to sitting Shiva, I guess you might say, except there's a lot more celebrating than there is mourning, which is a really good thing. And it's one of the things that helps bind it binds generations together, and it binds people from different villages, different backgrounds. It binds them all together as well.
Yeah, here it seems like if there's a death, it's like you get a funeral on Sunday, you know, you get maybe a casserole by the afternoon, and then Monday it's like time to go back to work.
Yeah.
Nobody cares after that.
Yeah, gone and forgotten
Yeah.
for the most part.
So this empathy and compassion, how does it work in being a criminal defense attorney? Like, can you, even though your life is probably much different than a lot of your clients, can you put yourself in your client's shoes?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, I grew up in a neighborhood in Los Angeles that was, I would say, disadvantaged, Echo Park. It's gentrified now, and it's much different than it was when I grew up. I grew up in a Hispanic neighborhood, and there weren't many people who got graduate degrees in the neighborhood that I grew up in. It was very easy for me to associate more with the people who were arrested than the people who were doing the arresting in my neighborhood. And it's something that I've never forgotten. It's very easy for me to put myself in the shoes of my clients because of the way that I grew up. So yeah, empathy is incredibly important. There are a lot of defense lawyers who at one time were DAs, and I never trust those people. Because you are either naturally on the side of the man, or you are naturally on the side of the people who flip the man the bird. And that's what side I'm on. So if you came from being the man to want to come over and stand with me as I'm making fun of the man, I have to look at you a little bit skeptically.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? When you look at people, it's like, so your background was not the greatest,
Correct.
but you move up the ladder and you do well. Now we're going to talk about this a little bit later as we go on, but in terms of politics, let's throw out the political parties. Let's just say conservative, liberal. A lot of conservatives seem to say, well, listen, I climbed the ladder. I'm going to cut the ladder down. I don't want anybody coming up here with me. Whereas I think you sound more like a person who's done well and says, you know, I want to help other people as well. Am I right?
Absolutely. And I don't care who you are, nobody does it alone. These people who say, oh, I did it on my own and I pulled myself up by my bootstraps. No, you didn't. You did it with the help of a system that enabled you to succeed, whether it was through student loans or grants or somebody who took you under their wing and mentored you. Nobody does it by themselves. And if you think that you did, you're deluding yourself. I know that even though I didn't have the parental guidance that perhaps some people do, there were a lot of people who enabled me to succeed, and I'll never forget that. And I try to mentor and do what I can to enable the next generation and the generation after that to follow.
So it sounds like you have a lot of gratitude.
Very much so. Every day. And sometimes it's hard. In my profession, sometimes it's hard to be grateful because I spend a lot of time arguing with people. As a lawyer, that's really what you do. When you boil it down, you argue with people. Or you try and convince people to do things that they don't want to do. And sometimes it's hard to sit back and be grateful after spending a full day arguing, screaming, cajoling, doing whatever it is.
So what's the most difficult thing that you have had to come back from? Like your worst day, do you remember them?
When I was a kid, my mom passed away on my 9th birthday.
Wow.
So from the standpoint of having a real setback, that's probably the greatest setback that I had in my life. I've had professional setbacks. I've had disappointments. But a child losing a parent is a fairly significant event, I'm sure you can imagine.
See, you so much don't really want to look at it that you're still saying it's a fairly significant
It's
event.
an incredibly significant
Okay,
event.
so now we're
yeah.
talking.
Yeah. No, there's
Come
no
on,
doubt.
let's be honest.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
Losing your mom at 9 is not a fairly significant event.
One of the things that, I underwent some therapy. When I graduated from law school and I started my career, I had when you want to talk about a significant event, I had a client who was a young Filipino, years old, and she worked for a big law firm in San Diego. And she got fired, and she claimed she got fired because of a heart condition that she had, so it was a violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I was very fresh out of law school, and I decided that I got talked into taking her case, and it was against one of the largest law firms in San Diego. And they gave it to their senior partner, and the guy proceeded to teach me what civil law is all about, basically, as he papered me to death and basically took up every moment of my day by way of teaching me lessons. She would come into my office 2-3 times a week and cry, and it just resulted in an amount of stress that I began to have an irregular heartbeat as a result of the stress. And one day I went to the hospital, and a young ER doctor said to me, "You've got an enlarged heart, and we need you to wear this Holter monitor." And I had an athletic heart because I was an athlete. She didn't tell me that. My heart was larger than most because I ran 3, 4, 5 miles a day and played basketball. Well, I woke up thinking I was having a heart attack. I was having a panic attack, and I didn't know that. And I drove myself to the hospital, and the cardiologist looked at me and laughed and said, "Your heart is as healthy as can possibly be. This is all in your head." So I went to counseling to learn to handle the stress.
Right.
And one of the things that I learned is that I have a tendency to really sort of minimize the bad things and sort of downplay them. And it's something that I've struggled with, but it's just a part of me. So when I say it was a fairly significant event, it was an incredibly traumatic event that changed my life.
And now you're thinking, this is why I came on the show, so you can call me out on it.
It's all right. We bury these things, and it's good to talk about them, and it's good to remember what it is that is really important in life.
So you were raised by your father?
I was raised by my father until I was about 15. I moved to Montana and said, "You can come if you want." And so I chose to remain in LA, and I was the only kid in my high school who had his own apartment.
You're kidding, right?
No, I'm not kidding.
How did you maintain an apartment and go to school at 15 years old?
I worked at UPS. I became a Teamster at 16. I worked at UPS in their Soto hub, which was the biggest hub in the country for packages at the time. And I would work there from 10 to 4 in the morning. I'd get some sleep, and I'd go to school, and I'd come home and I'd sleep a little bit more, and you do what you have to do. I never really
that's
looked at
amazing.
it. Well, I never really looked at it as anything different than my friends who, after school, went to work.
Again, you minimized it, but that's okay. Maybe you had to at that time to get through that.
You only know what you know.
Yeah, that's
know, it's,
incredible. Seriously, 15 years old, and you raised yourself.
Pretty much, yeah. I had
Wow.
friends. I had friends whose parents took it upon themselves to look after me to a certain extent. I was invited over to people's houses quite a bit to eat dinner and things like that, and they would check on me and make sure I was okay. But yeah, pretty much that was the story.
You probably got tired of cooking for yourself at some point.
You know, I learned to be a good cook, but I also learned that McDonald's had 33-cent hamburgers on Tuesday, and you could go to Taco Bell and you could buy, and so for every day of the week there was some deal that I could spend $3 and eat dinner. So.
So after that type of upbringing, what in this world can scare you?
Plenty.
Oh, still, really?
But you know, it's more big picture stuff. There's not much on a day-to-day basis that scares me, but Donald Trump scares me. The erosion of what's going on in our country today scares me.
Yeah.
And it really does, because I have kids. I don't worry for myself, but I do worry for my children.
Interesting. So when you were on that conservative radio station, tell me what that was like. 'Cause I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but they had Rush Limbaugh, Michael Savage,
Alan Stock, who's the local conservative crazy around town here, let's say. Alan, how you doing, Alan? But yeah, it was, and you know, the interesting thing was that Alan and I were the only two employees of KDON. Everybody else had pay for play. So everybody else bought their time slot and then had their advertisers that they signed up. There were only two shows that didn't run the disclaimer that these are not the opinions of KDON. So that adds a little bit of pressure, because you're actually kind of speaking for the radio station, and they're listening very intently and very closely to what it is that you're saying, because they could get sued, or they could be held responsible for what you say. It was an incredible experience from the standpoint of almost everybody who listens to that station is a hardcore conservative,
Absolutely.
bordering on insane nut job.
I agree. I've listened to it just to know. I mean, let's be honest. I'm liberal, right? So I want to see what the other side, how they think. And I'm like, how is that possible if they can think like that? And they've gone through their own experiences to think like that, I guess. But
and you know, it's funny, because I was on from 5 to 7 in the morning, and if you think at 9 or 10 in the morning you're listening to some hardcore stuff, try listening to the people who are awake at 5 in the morning trying to talk to you about politics.
yeah, I was
Oh my, it's you know, but I'll tell you something that's funny. First of all, we're talking about 2012 to 2014, so the dialogue has coarsened quite a bit since then. Back then, when I started my show, Romney and Obama were involved in the 2012 campaign, and the discourse was much more civil than it is now. So I would have people call in and tell me I was crazy. First they'd go, how in the hell did you get this job? When I first started, the questions were, where's Heidi Harris, who I replaced, and how did you get this job? And then as people would talk to me and I would talk to them, they would realize that we really don't have that much that separates us. We all kind of want the same things. We just don't express it in the same way. And by the end of the calls that I would take, most of the people would say, you know what, I agree with you. And believe me, that gave me as much a sense of pride to hear those words as anything that I would do in court on a day-to-day basis. Is that you could sway people or make people realize that what you're saying is not that different than what they want. Now, it seems to have completely gone the opposite direction in the last year and a half.
Yeah, true. So it sounds like your ability to be a good lawyer, there's a lot of transferable skills in order to communicate on the radio too. Because I'm going to take a guess here and say, let's say you know you're right. But if you annihilate another human being and make them feel stupid, maybe that works in the courtroom. But when you talk to another human being trying to sway their opinion, if you make them feel stupid, they're just going to come back after. They're going to hold their ground a lot more, right?
Absolutely. You're going to force them to defend themselves. Instead of opening their mind, they're going to close their mind. And there is an art to exactly what you're talking about, and that is trying to gently sway people to your way of thinking. And at the same time, there were times perhaps I would be swayed to their way of thinking when they had a good point. Although I tend to think that was less often than them coming to my way of thinking.
Well, we're gonna go take a little break, and we'll be right back.
Very good.
I'm the world's worst cleaning lady. I'm here in your home having a pretty spectacular Tuesday. But I don't notice the loose rug at the top of your stairs. And that's about to become an issue for me. And if you've got the wrong home insurance coverage, my medical bills could get expensive. So get Allstate.
Welcome back to the Rise Above Show. I'm Joe Proni.
I'm Heidi Mancini.
And I'm Michael Gowdy.
All right, so we started to touch on politics. So you mind if we go a little deeper with that?
Absolutely not. I love to talk politics.
All right, so let's do this. Let me hit you with some facts, like real facts, not like fake news. So since 1960, Democrats have created 66 million jobs. Republicans created 24 million jobs. Well, 66 would be more, right? I mean, that's just the basic stuff.
I defer to Heidi on that.
Defer to me on the math.
Democrats have been better at decreasing the federal deficit, and recessions are 5 times more common when a Republican is president. So when we get down to these basic things, why is there such evil discourse out there, and where is the debate? And why do Republicans win? How can you win when you just look at basic facts? After that, it's game over.
Well, I'll tell you this. Facts don't seem to mean as much as they did a few years ago to start out with. But you're absolutely right. When you cite all the statistics, it's clear that America is better off with a Democrat in charge than we are with Republicans. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. Republicans are much better street fighters, however. We, as Democrats, seem to think that taking the high road is the way to do it, and Republicans are willing to get down in the gutter and do what they need to do to win. And that seems to be the difference between all these very close elections, Bush v. Gore, where Bush was willing to basically go to the Florida Supreme Court and assert his political advantage, and Al Gore simply stood by and did what he thought was the honorable thing to do, and that is concede.
Right.
There was nothing honorable about conceding, given what happened after that, because we ended up in a war in Iraq and Afghanistan. Afghanistan may have been justified, but clearly Iraq was not.
Absolutely.
And that occurred under a Republican president, and that's just one of many examples of Republicans abusing the trust that the American people put in them.
But why is it so difficult? I mean, you were on the front line, right? Let's say, you have your show. It seems that conservative radio is huge. It's everywhere. Every time you turn on a dial, it's conservative. I can't think of one major liberal voice out there. I mean, let's skip past like comedians and stuff like that and entertainers. That doesn't count. I mean, real people that are in the political arena. Like, where is the liberal Rush Limbaugh? Where is that?
There isn't one, and there probably can't be one, because to be a Rush Limbaugh, you have to be willing to go and assert conspiracy theories that are so far out that people have to stop and listen and say. And liberals deal in facts, and conservatives don't deal in facts. They deal in fantasy or whatever it is that they want people to believe. It's Rush Limbaugh's entertainment. There's nothing really informative about his show. He is an entertainer, and he's the first one to admit that. So, as long as liberals and Democrats want to talk about facts and substance and policy, to be as entertaining as somebody who wants to talk about conspiracy theories.
Interesting.
Do you think that has to do with IQ at all?
Well, I will tell you this. There are studies, I'm not going to say necessarily IQ, because I know plenty of smart conservatives, although I have to believe a lot of these conservatives don't necessarily believe the things that they're saying, but they say it for economic reasons or things like that. But there have been some interesting studies that have shown that the difference between the conservative mind and the liberal mind is that conservatives are motivated mostly by fear, and liberals are not. And this is a physiological hardwiring of our brains, that if you're conservative, you respond more and more quickly to fear-based messages than liberals do.
Interesting. Like, we did a show on that, 2 shows on that, to be specific. And I can tell you, when Republicans continuously call liberals snowflakes, I can tell you about snowflakes because that's how we lose sponsors when someone is a conservative and we talk about the truth. There's nothing wrong, because I'm also a therapist, by the way. I know the studies you're talking about, and it routinely suggests, it can't prove, right? We can say it very strongly suggests that your average liberal has 10 to 12 extra IQ points. And they work from the prefrontal cortex, right, reasoning. Whereas the conservative mind works from the amygdala, which is the reptilian part of the brain, which is all fear response. No, I mean, I'm not trying to be funny.
No,
it's just,
but it is funny.
It is funny, but it's pure science. So,
Yes.
okay, so we're just a couple of people having a conversation here. Knowing this to be factual, how do you get that fact, and with the other facts we've lined up, and how do you express that to people so liberals can actually win an election? Like, how do you cut that gap?
I will tell you this. I don't believe that liberals win elections by converting conservatives to our way of thinking. It's going to happen. Liberals are going to win elections when liberals start showing up to vote.
That's a good point.
And right now, the fact that in this primary, I think 21% of all eligible voters are actually going to vote tells you as much about our democracy and the kind of shape that it's in as anything else. And until we can turn out people who start voting means a change in the way their lives are going to be lived, we're not going to win against conservatives. I mean, I hate to say it, but conservatives are motivated to vote by fear.
Right. They are motivated. Like, I mean, you see it on social media. Conservatives are so, like, militant, whereas liberals are like, I love my wife. I want to hang out with my kids. I want to, whatever. And they're just, I want my gun. I want my Bible. It's like, it's a whole different mindset.
Absolutely. And it's gotten uglier and uglier. I mean, it really has. I have a lot of fear when I get on Facebook and I read the posts that are even left on my own site. I mean, I get threats and ugly discourse that I don't particularly like to engage with, and I also don't like to censor people. So typically, I'll keep it up and let the people who agree with me respond to that until it devolves into a shouting match, at which time I try and shut it down.
Right, then it's just you're playing ping pong at this point.
Yeah,
You're not
and
like
nobody's talking to each other. They're talking at each other
Yeah.
and by each other. And there's nothing worse than speaking to somebody who, instead of listening to what you're saying, is already trying to think about what they're going to say next.
So as a lawyer, that for a living you create an argument to sway, that must drive you crazy because you're talking to a wall, literally.
It does. And look, the entire point of my representation is to persuade the opposition when it comes to my client. So I listen to what they say. It's something that's ingrained in you. When you go to law school, they tear down the way you think about problems. And the main thing that they build up is to analyze problems from the other side. So you can anticipate the strengths of the other side's argument, and you can find ways to combat it, and also you can see the weaknesses and find ways to attack those.
We do that in sports too.
Absolutely.
Right? You were an athlete.
Absolutely, yes. And so while I spend, and I get people who say, "Just shut up, you liberal snowflake." It is frustrating because there's not a lot of ways you can analyze that.
A libtard. I get called a libtard.
Libtard. That's the highest
I'm like,
form
well,
of.
that's a libtard.
Yeah.
That's okay. I can take it.
So, we did a show after that shooting, that massacre here, and obviously when we do a show, I think it's done really well. I mean, we look into all the science behind it and everything else, and it was a good show. We probably had 5,000 views, not bad. But then you go to Alex Jones, somebody like that, conservative, who said that the shooting actually never happened. and yet he had like 5 million views. And then you get people in Las Vegas going like, Vegas strong. Half of them are Republicans that are actually on his site believing that the massacre never happened. Like, how in the world do you fight that type of mindset? It's almost impossible, isn't it?
It really is almost impossible. People will believe what they are told the loudest and the longest, I guess. And Alex Jones is very, very good at screaming at the top of his lungs. Unfortunately, I think Alex Jones is headed for some trouble. He's being sued by the families in the Sandy Hook killing.
He said Sandy Hook didn't happen either.
Right, and some parents are actually suing him for saying that their children weren't killed. And I do believe that the way Alex Jones is going to end up is that he is going to be driven into bankruptcy and driven off the air by judgments against him through these lawsuits. There doesn't seem to be any other way to shut him up.
Right.
And I'll tell you something else. This all kind of goes back to the Reagan administration with the taking away the fairness doctrine. And instead of having to hear two sides of every issue, if you wanted to talk politics on TV, they had to present equal time to the opposing side, and Reagan did away with that, and then you had the rise of Fox News. That's exactly how Fox News came to be, and Fox News is the single thing that is responsible for this rise of extremism, in my mind.
Right.
You can all be traced back to Fox News.
They're technically not a news station,
No,
right? They're entertainment.
Absolutely,
They're
they can't even
registered
call
as an
themselves.
entertainment,
That's
yeah.
correct. Yeah.
But the people watching it, it's like you want to grab them and shake them, going, "Listen, this is not news. Do you know that? It's entertainment. Do you know that?" And they're like, "No, I'm just going to vote for president anyway." It's like, what are you doing? It's like they're reading a Dr. Seuss book to do brain surgery. It makes no sense to me. I don't understand it.
And even worse, a president that calls legitimate news sources fake news and constantly bolsters what appears on Fox and Friends, which is typically fake news.
Right. So the other subject that really interests me was all of it. There's actually go through it today. But let's talk about family values, right? Like if we're going to push that, conservatives usually say family values. It's all about the family. Now, just from talking to you, you obviously have a lot of family values, right? You love your kids, you love your wife, you help people. Family values. But when they have their family values, the evangelicals, like here's some more facts. In red states, there's more divorce than there is in blue states. There's more teen pregnancies, there's more prostitution, there's more incest, there's more pedophilia, more of them are on welfare, and there's more domestic abuse in these supposed family values places. How do they ever line that up with their evangelical Christian backgrounds? And those are facts. And then by like 82% or so, they vote for Trump, who's the exact opposite of anything that would be considered to be family values.
He may be the least Christ-like figure we've ever had in American politics, I think. I'm not sure if you guys want me to get started on my problems with religion, but hypocrisy is by far the number one problem that I have with religion. And all you need to do is look at the evangelicals who talk about family values and then turn around and vote for Donald Trump, a man who's admitted to cheating on his he's been married 3 times and he cheated on all 3 of his wives as far as we know, because he married 2 of the ones that he cheated on with. And the 3rd one now with the Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal stories, we know that we have a pretty good idea that Trump cheated on his current wife right after, either when she was pregnant or right after when she had her kids. Yet here are, I go so far as to, I see evangelicals proclaiming Trump to be the second coming of Christ.
I've seen that.
Which is just absolutely mind-numbing.
Based on what?
I do not know.
It's amazing. It's like you don't want to laugh at people, right? Because it makes them feel stupid, and then they fight you more. But it's like, how do you not laugh? Like,
I do
Give
laugh.
me one solid piece of evidence that would say that Donald Trump is like a really good evangelical.
No, you know what? The evangelicals, I believe, are motivated by one or two core issues, abortion being the main issue. And
Right.
I think at least the leaders of the evangelical movement, your Franklin Grahams and the rest of these charlatans who call themselves men of God, yet espouse the most heinous of policy operations, they are willing to put up with all kinds of hypocrisy in hopes of getting what it is they want politically, which is abortion to be outlawed. The white, the continued power structure being run by white Protestant people, you know, and that's what's so frightening, is that they refuse to acknowledge the reality that this is a multicultural society, and we're becoming more multicultural every single day.
Right. True.
And they want to go back to the way things were in the 1950s. They call it the good old days, but as I think about it, we had the civil rights movement was beginning, and there was a lot of, and there was nothing really all that good about the 1950s.
Yeah, I mean, you can go back. I mean, slavery and everything else.
Sure.
But let's even take it today, right? The average person, they say, well, not the average, about 20 Americans right now, if they got hit with a bill for $400, they can't pay it. And I don't mean to make fun of anybody. It's the exact opposite. I want to help people.
Absolutely.
But how can we say, like, things are going so great, and we're the richest country in the world, yet, you know, healthcare is still a problem. They don't want people to have health care even. It's amazing to me.
When you have the top 8 families in the world controlling as much wealth as the bottom half of our society, as the bottom 160 million people, you are going to have problems. We live in a plutocratic society, and that's the way it is. And the great con that the Republicans have managed to put forward for the past 30 or 40 years is what's good for business is good for America, and that is not the case, because capitalism is based on greed. The motivating factor of capitalism is greed, and greed is not a basis to run a society, because when you have people running a society based on what's good for me and nobody else, what you get is this inequality that we've got now.
I mean, just basic stuff. I don't know the exact numbers, maybe you do. But how much would you say corporate profits have gone up in the last, say, 10 years?
Oh, I'm sure more than 100%. I'm sure corporate profits have more than doubled in the last 10 years.
Yeah, the number, and during Obama's time it was like that. It was like, I remember looking up the number, it was like 167%. How much of that trickled down to the middle class?
None.
Zero. You're exactly right on that too.
In fact, the middle class has lost ground.
Exactly.
Since 1970, the middle class has lost about 20% of their buying power.
Yeah, it's terrible. Let me switch gears because we don't have a lot of time. I want to play a little devil's advocate, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Because I noticed something when we were talking in the beginning. So you're a father, you're a manly guy, you've played sports. A war on masculinity in this country. You and I may be liberal, and that's true, but there is a section of liberals that are really dragging down the whole party. Because when you look at one of the things I look at, the answer for me is why liberals lose elections, because it's like you said, it's the cultural stuff. It's the men are not allowed to be men anymore. We're degraded for being masculine. And I feel that on a daily basis as a therapist. I mean, the sexism is incredible. Like, if I walk in to get a job, I mean, I've heard this more than once. Your type of masculinity is really not an asset in this business. Really? Do you know how sexist that is? Like, and I've heard others. I don't want to make the whole show about me there, but it's over and over and over again. 77% of suicides are men. Men are 2 times more likely to be drug addicted. 90% of people in jail are men. More girls graduate high school. More girls are in graduate school. 20% of our boys are diagnosed with ADHD and are medicated with psychotropic meds. Single women are 2 times more likely to buy a house. more males over 25 now live at home than by themselves or with a wife. And I can go on and on. But there's something there, and I'm not saying it's straight political, but somehow somebody has moved the ball to say it is political, that the real men are conservatives and the wimpy men are liberals. So what do you think about all that?
Those are interesting statistics, and they're depressing, obviously. It's tough to get a handle on exactly what it is that's driving that. We have this incel movement. Are you aware of what that is? I've only recently become aware of these involuntarily celibate young men who apparently are being very
Exactly.
reactionary towards women.
Right.
And I've sort of become fascinated by it.
Me
because,
too. And I'm looking all this stuff up.
Yeah, and so it's tough to say exactly what it is driving that. I don't think it's political, although it has been politicized, as you say. Republicans feel free to be old school masculine. Look at
Right.
Trump. I mean, he's a misogynist, and I don't use that word lightly, but this is a guy who says grab him by the woohoo and thinking that that's the way all of us are supposed to talk. Well, that is locker room talk. We've all said things like
Right.
that in the past, but clearly, I'm not sure I don't think you want your president to have that as a guiding philosophy. So it's kind of got to be moderated to some way. But we all should be free to express our masculinity or our femininity as we see fit.
Yeah, because I think that's a stumbling block for liberals, is that it's just being seen. Like when they had that parade, I forgot what they called it. They had a name for it, but all these women were marching.
Oh yeah, the Me Too movement.
Yeah,
and the
I mean, didn't you?
Million Women March, I
Yeah,
believe it was
didn't
called.
you feel
yeah.
a little left out?
I did
I
because
know I did, because I'm a man. I love women. I'm always extremely more protective than I should be, as I'm sure you are. And yet, when they have a march, it's like, it's not a bunch of liberals. It's only the women. It's like, you're a man, get out. And it's like, as much as I'm not conservative, I almost feel a little magnetic pull towards people who actually want me to be with them.
I can see that, and this whole Me Too movement. Look, I certainly agree that there are places and times where women certainly have the right to say, I have been taken advantage of, or I've been treated in such a way, but you run the risk of people making false allegations. And how do you come back from a false allegation like you are a sexual harasser? And you don't. I mean,
don't.
What period of time is there for redemption before somebody who may have done something that is considered offensive because they didn't know any better, as opposed to somebody who really is somebody who is a danger to women? There's just no way to come back from that.
No, there's not. So, unfortunately, our time's up. But
It's been fun.
Yeah, it was great having you here. Would you like to come back at another time?
Absolutely,
We can talk
I'd
about
love
some
it.
more issues.
I'd love
And
it.
tell everybody where they can reach you if they need your services.
Well, if you need my services, you can look online at www. You don't even have to say that anymore, do you? It's gowdylaw.com, Gowdey law.com. I also have a Facebook page that is an extension of my radio show at facebook.com/Michael Gowdy straight up. And you can follow along with the things that Joe and Heidi and I have been talking about today and the other things that I find of interest. And you can call my office if you want to get in touch with me directly, 702-471-0321. Thank you.
Thank you.
So this has been the Rise Above Show. I am Joe Peroni.
Heidi Mancini,
Michael Gowdy.
Thank you. It was fun.
Thanks very much.
thank you.